Hey printers, do you want to do face down multicolor prints with your Bambu Lab printer like this and this? I'm Omi and I'm about to show you how to use free software to take your 2D art, convert it, design it, color it, and print it using methods I've learned to make my own pop culture magnets. It's not just magnets, this process will work for keychains, coasters, and signs. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with anyone else who wants to print some fun stuff. Let's go! Alright, first step, graphic design. We're using GIMP. It's free. It works perfect for this. You don't need anything more complex unless you already have it, and that's great if you do. There are two things that you want to keep in mind in this stage. The first one is keeping your line art simple. Black and white. Make sure you don't have any no colors, because you're going to be converting this into an SVG and colors can kind of mess up that process. You want to keep things simple so there's not like very complex, like hair could be very complex for your printer. And that leads us to the second thing to keep in mind is your line widths, your tolerance for what you can print, what your extruder can actually print. If it's too thin, like you see around inside of this ear here, or this small line, or some of these smaller lines, you want to make sure that you thicken those up. So if you have really thin lines, what'll happen is your printer can only print so small. And when you get to the slicing phase, it'll probably make this portion disappear. So it won't even print that part of the line. And you'll have to come back, you'll have to thicken the line up, and then redesign, and go through that whole step. So if you can avoid this early, that is my tip for you. Make sure your lines are thick enough for your print. Save your file. Should be the XCF file, and then export as a PNG. Now I've already got one whipped up here. May look familiar to some, but go ahead and make sure you save that or export that as PNG. Keep your GIMP or graphic design program open in the background, because as good as you may be in avoiding those future errors, you may still have to come back to the drawing board and make a few edits, and then go through this whole process again that I'm about to show you. So that's it for the design portion. Let's move ahead to converting to an SVG. Now, there are a lot of SVG converting options out there. I prefer to use picksvg.com. I've used them for a couple of years. They're great for all my projects. If you have your own favorite, go for it. This part really, as long as it becomes an SVG, you're fine. The most important thing here is when you upload it, you'll see it this is the preview of the conversion. It didn't fill it in. It's only because you have to adjust the filter a little bit. You can mess around and find one if it doesn't look right to you. I change it. I usually select internal 3, and this gives me good line thickness as well as filling in the dark areas correctly. After this, download your SVG. We're ready to move on to the design phase in TINKERCAD. Oh, TINKERCAD, we've made it to the design step of this process. I love this. It's very powerful. I use it for all my projects. Some folks are sometimes surprised at the things you can make in here. It's fantastic for coasters, keychains, and magnets like this magnet we're making right here. When you get in here, you want to import, which is this option here, and you'll select your file, and you'll often get this issue because your SVG is very large. You need to shrink this down a little bit. It's a little bit larger than the workspace. I like to just take it down to like that 100 range, because you're going to resize this anyway. This part doesn't matter. So import that. It's going to take a moment. It has to process it and import that SVG. So we'll give it a second here. All right, look how fast that was. Okay, so at this point, look, this doesn't look like what we want yet, right? It's very rough, but a good thing to do first here is I like to position this a little bit, check the size. That's about good for a magnet, it's going to be a pretty decent size. So let's even this out a little bit. That's fine. Now, this is where the magic happens. So you want to get the right thickness of the print. So we're going to make it 3mm. Right, it looks a little bit better. That's how it's going to print. You don't want it to be a 10mm. That's going to take a lot of filament. So at this stage, it's just an outline. Now what we want to do, we're not assigning it an actual color for print. We're just assigning it a color inside TinkerCAD so that we can tell the difference between the layers. We're going to have different layers or objects. So you want to be able to tell the difference easily. So this first one, we want to duplicate and repeat. This just makes a copy and it's in the same space as the original. Now you're going to go change the fill mode on this second one to silhouette. This fills in all the internal spaces and you'll see it takes a second. We're going to make it go faster. There we go. And you can kind of see, okay, it's hard to see. Here's where we change now this second object's color a little bit so we can see the difference. It's all in the same space, so you kind of get that little fractured look here. They're all sharing the same space. Now we're going to do it one more time. So we have the silhouette layer selected and we're going to duplicate and repeat. It creates another one just like silhouette, but we're going to change it to outer line. For me, I like this look for my magnets. So I'm going to change this to round so we don't have these harsh edges. And I'm going to change it to, let's say 2.5 and take a look at how that looks. Yeah, that looks nice. Like we got a nice edge around there. We've got the internal fill and we have the original object. So that's three objects right now, 3 shapes. And what we want to do at this stage is we want to go ahead and select our original import, which remember we colored a little bit darker so we could tell the difference between the other two that are white. We are going to copy one more time. So we're going to create another object and then we're going to hide it. And you do that with this little light bulb.
Light bulb.
Okay. So now at this stage, you'll see this extra thing over here. This shape is my pre-made magnet recess that I put in. So if you're making a keychain, this would probably be your little loop object. You can have it ready to go. If you make a lot of them like I do, I have this shape already made. It's the size of an 8x3 magnet. You give it a little extra space. So it's 8x5. I'm sorry, 8.5. So you get that little extra bit there with the printing because it does tend to be a little bit larger in real life. So at this stage, what we're going to do, because we're going to be converting this or designing this to have 2 main STLs, 2 objects, the base layer and the outline, which is the line art, the black line art. So to do this, we're working on just the base right now. And we have these 3 shapes. We're going to turn this over to put our magnet recesses in. This step is not for everybody unless you're making a magnet, but I decided to throw this in here just so you can kind of see what that's like. So we have our negative magnet recess. And we're going to put it, we're just going to willy-nilly put this here for now. Now that's in the same space as the object. So we want to lift that up a little bit, right? Because we don't, if we print it, it's going to look ridiculous. It's not going to be right. It's going to have a hole right there. So we're going to lift this up just 1 millimeter. So you can kind of see it sticks up a little bit. So it's going to cut a hole. We're looking at the back or the bottom of the magnet. And this is going to cut a hole. It's going to leave a millimeter. So it'll still print the top of the magnet without the hole in it. And we're going to use 2 magnets. So we're going to duplicate, and we can just move that right down here. So we have a nice even sort of thing going on. 2 magnet recesses and the 3 objects, the silhouette, the outline, and the original line art that we imported. We're going to select all those. We're going to group them, and it's going to convert everything to this dark color because it's now one object. This is, again, the base. We're looking at the back of the magnet. We're going to flip that back over. We're going to change the color so it returns to a lighter color. I don't use white in here just because the gray is a little bit easier on the eyes. And we're going to unhide that original import. Now, this original import is 3 millimeters high. That's the same space as everything else. See, the line will kind of go through there. That's not good. So what we have to do is we have to shrink this down a little bit to 1. This is just going to be the top layer. Now it sinks it back to the bottom of the workspace, and we want to lift that up to 2. There we go. So now just that first millimeter is the line art, and you'll see now that line is up in there in that little recess. So we're still not done here because now this is important. This throws people off because you'd think, we're done. Look at that. But you see this fractured look here. It means that line art that we just made 1 millimeter at the top layer is in the same space as the base. And if you try to export at this stage, you won't be able to color this very well because it's one flat, physically it's one flat space, one flat object. So what we have to do is we have the outline object selected. So that dark colored object, this is the line art. We're going to duplicate in place, and we're going to change this to a negative space. So it's going to cut itself out of the base layer. We need to hold down your shift, select the base layer right here. Any of the white area is the silhouette object. Now you have 2 shapes selected. You have your negative outline space and your base selected. That's it. You don't want to select the original outline. Leave that one as is. Now you want to group the base and the negative outline together. And what that does is it cuts out the space so that your original outline now fills in that gap perfectly. It sits in its own space now. Now the black object is its own thing. So that's our outline object. And then we have our base object. That's the secret sauce for this. Took a lot of trial and error to get this right. So at this point, you want to export. You want to select your white area, which is the base, right? So because we colored this earlier, it makes this a lot easier. Select your base, choose export. I name these, whatever, and then base, so that I know that that's the base object. And you can kind of see if I remove the outline object, if I hide it, this is now the base. You can kind of see where it's been cut out. We'll return that. And then you want to select, so once you save your base, you want to select your outline, the darker one. You want to select that, export, and I call it outline. So whatever _ outline, that's what I do. Now you have your 2 STLs. And at this point, this is where you go to the next step, which is the printing step, the slicing step, and the coloring. That's where all the coloring happens and everything. Because you've done it this way, it's going to be a lot easier. You'll see in a second. Let's load that up. Yes, we've made it to the slicing portion. This is going to be where we import our STLs, where we color them, where we slice them, and we get them started printing. So we're going to import our two STLs that we made. Let's get those added here. Now, when you do this, when you select, so you're going to select this box up here to select your files. And when you select your base STL and your outline STL that we just made in the previous example, it's going to import them as a single object with multiple parts, and it's going to give you this dialog here, and you're going to want to say yes, load these files as a single object with multiple parts. You'll see it loads it up, and it's all one color. Ugh. You may have to repair. Sometimes this happens. I'm gonna go ahead and repair this, and then we're going to be able to start kind of setting this up here. Right on, the repair is done. So what is this? Why does this look this way? So we want to go into the objects area. Now, this is where creating two STLs makes this awesome, because we're coloring in two different ways. We're coloring with objects, which is how we're selecting two different objects here, and then the paint bucket after that. So first and foremost, let's do the objects. So it always imports it. It's usually like this dark color because we kind of set it as dark. We want to change this base, right? Again, I'm going to change the whole thing over to white, and it changes everything over because we only need the outline to be black. Boom, look at how beautiful that is. So now you have a white object, and the outline, because it's only 1 millimeter, is black, and that only goes 1 millimeter deep. We're going to be flipping this over eventually, so that's important to know. At this stage, we now want to select the base object, because that's where we have our cutout. And when we go up to color to paint this, it now knows, because it's smart enough to know when you select, let's say, fill, because this is why we made that cutout. It makes it easy to color, because it can tell the boundaries now, because we cut out that outline shape from the base earlier. So now at this point, we're able to color. So very easy fill sort of coloring here. We got skin tone. I think I've changed my orange out. Oh no, I can still use orange. Look at this. Look at how easy that is to color. Isn't that awesome? Okay, let's get the rest of this in. And some brown for the shoes and the cricket bat. Don't forget that little area. And then we'll just use a little gray here. Look at that beautiful coloring. Very easy. Done. We don't need to use the paintbrush or circle type tool for this one. For some of mine, if I have like a eyes and I don't want to, maybe I want to have a white area around the eyes, I'll draw a little border with the skin tone color around it and then fill the skin tone area. Makes it really simple. So that's another little trick. I don't have that example I can show you here right now, but we are done with the coloring. At this point, we want to flip this over, right? Because we're printing this face down, so we get that wonderful texture off of your sheet. So let's deselect the paint bucket, and let's make sure we've selected the main base object, which is everything. And we're going to just flip it over with Orient. So now we have this. Now I like to switch this around a little bit. I move this. This is personal preference. But when you're printing different colors like black or anything like dark color, sometimes it'll leave streaks. So you sometimes want that last little bit of, let's say it's printing black. You want that last little bit to be as high up as possible so it doesn't drag that filament over your entire print. It only drags it off the edge, maybe, in case it's not retracting as it should, right? Sometimes that happens, no matter how good you are. You can at this stage customize the order of the first layer color sequence. Right now I've been leaving, so I used to do this all the time. I've been leaving it as is, just on the auto, and it's been working just fine for me. I've actually been okay with it. I haven't had any major goof ups or problems with that retraction, like I was talking about, dragging filament over the print. So it's just fine for me right now. You may experiment with it. If you have any issues, you can come back and change that up. At this point, make sure you save your project here so that you have it. Now, this is ready to be sliced, and we're gonna slice this real quick. And I want to talk about one thing real fast before we talk about the print settings. So with it being face down, you can drag this preview down to the first layer and kind of see what you're dealing with. You don't have to drag it down, but I like to look at the top as well. But you can basically look at the magnet and just kind of see if there's any lines that are missing or that it can't print. This all looks fine. This looks good. It looks like it will print just fine just by looking at this. There's no real, you can ignore some of these marker points because it's just putting that in for seams. It's not actually like a gap or anything like that. But what I would be looking for here is if any thin lines have disappeared, like if there was facial details. That happens with the faces a lot when I do a lot of fine details. You have to check to make sure the eyes are still correct, the nose, the mouth. This one's pretty simple, so there's really no issues there. So we are going to put this back up. So that looks good. It's ready for print, but before we print, I want to talk about the settings. The settings I use are things I've gathered over the years and just kind of tested. And when I find something that works for me, I often don't stray from it. So you all may have some different tips and tricks that may be better. Put it in the comments if you do for this type of print, but it can be kind of tough. And some of the trying to find this information out there can be kind of tough from other folks. Sometimes you kind of have to pick their brains, specifically for people who print the way you do, the style, that process, so that you can figure it out and kind of adapt it and make it your own. But a few of the settings that are super important that I use are, I use Arachne, super important. I also use let's get back up here. So for a couple things here, I use Hilbert Curve for the bottom surface. It tends to fill it in a little bit better so you don't get the lines, some of the regular lines that you would get from like a monotonic or anything like that. It looks a little better. You may find you like it different. That's fine. And then I do use, gyroid. And then the next thing, the most important secret sauce for this that I found is the speed. So initial layer speeds are what we're looking at. So I tend to take this down quite a bit. I want to say off the top of my head, it's 50 at first. I change it to 30. So it's going slower on that initial layer, putting down those details that you want to be very pristine as much as possible. You don't want it rapidly trying to lay down that filament and causing all sorts of artifacts and issues for you. So again, that's the initial layer speed. As far as that goes, the other area that I change up here is the acceleration for the initial layer. I'll turn that down as well. So initial layer stuff, try to slow it down a little bit. You don't have to go crazy, just enough so that it's not rapidly laying down. By the time it hits the second layer, it's rapid, and that's fine because you've already laid down that detail on that first layer. It's okay, and that'll speed up the print. It'll go a lot faster after that. and it's pretty fun to watch when it speeds up. But those are the main settings changes for this type of print that I've used, and this may go well for your coasters, for your keychains, and then for your magnets like this one here. So at this stage, we're ready to print, which is obviously the most exciting part. We get to watch that beautiful first layer get put down. We're about to do that. So I'm going to print this, and we're going to move to watch some of the clips of the print here as it goes. And then we'll kind of display that here at the end. But thank you for joining me. I hope this helps y'all who are making these types of prints, and makes it easier for you and gets you excited, make you inspired to make some really fun things for other folks. Bye-bye.
How's that for a slice of fried gold?
Yeah, boy!